Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You send us the sources, we crack them open, pull out the key insights, basically, giving you that shortcut to being genuinely in the know.
That's the goal.
So today, we're diving into something pretty fascinating. It's this convergence of planned civic action and some really deep historical symbolism.
Yeah, we've got a whole stack of reports here detailing these nationwide protests planned for June 14th.
Right, and alongside those, there's this article that really digs into the history and the cultural meaning behind the phrase they're using, "No Kings." It's compelling because you have these concrete planned events, happening all over the country, but the language, the symbolism they're using, it connects right back to the founding ideas of the U.S.
Exactly. And like you said, one source even looks at how that symbolism's popping up in, fashion, T-shirts specifically, which shows how these big ideas can filter down into everyday things.
Unexpected places, yeah. So our mission today is to really unpack what's going on with this No Kings Day set for June 14th. We want to trace its roots, understand why that phrase is hitting home right now.
And see how this, pretty old historical concept is playing out today. In protests, obviously, but also, like you said, on clothes.
The sources really lay it out. Reports from different news outlets on the scale, the reasons, the local prep.
Mm-hmm. And then complementing that is this piece focusing just on the No Kings slogan. Its history, how it's showing up on T-shirts now, framing them as these sort of cultural statements.
It's a good mix. Let's just look at the organized action and the cultural vibe around it.
Definitely.
Should be interesting.
All right, let's jump right in. The core event. No Kings Day, June 14th. The sources say over 1,500 protests planned nationwide for this one day.
Yeah, 1,500. That number itself is, it's striking right off the bat. It's not just one big march somewhere.
No, it's spread out. And the organizers have specifically tagged it No Kings Day. A very intentional name. Very. And the sources frame this whole thing as a coordinated response, specifically aimed at President Trump's proposed military parade in Washington, D.C.
Right, and the date, June 14th. The reports flag that as significant, too. It's President Trump's 79th birthday.
And maybe more to the point, given the parade context, it's also the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary.
So a confluence of dates.
Definitely seems intentional from the organizer side. Picking that specific day links their protest and that No Kings slogan directly to the president and this big military anniversary.
It sets up a direct contrast. Their action versus what they see symbolized by a parade on that particular day.
Exactly. It's a counter-narrative.
And like you said, it's the nationwide scale that jumps out. These aren't just D.C. events.
No, not at all. The sources list cities large and small. Dallas, Philadelphia, Atlanta. Towns in Iowa, San Antonio, Austin. It just keeps going. All across the country.
It really points to a broad kind of grassroots mobilization, doesn't it?
It does. And what the sources are emphasizing is that these demonstrations, even the ones far from D.C., are apparently poised to be the largest single-day anti-Trump demonstrations since he returned to office.
Wow. Okay, that's a significant forecast.
It is. It suggests that, while the D.C. parade might be the immediate trigger, the feeling driving these protests is pretty widespread. It's tapping into something across many states.
So the energy isn't just focused on the Capitol. It's people activating where they live.
Right. And the sources give credit for this scale and coordination to specific groups. Indivisible is mentioned. They're known for focusing on local progressive action.
Mm-hmm. And the 5501 movement, too, which is also about grassroots organizing. They're cited as being key in coordinating all these separate efforts.
It's interesting seeing how these established networks are used to build this decentralized but seemingly very coordinated national day of action.
They provide the structure, I guess, for local groups to connect, share information, make sure they're all on the same page with the date and the core message.
Yeah, seems like it. That infrastructure is key for something this spread out.
Okay, so let's dig into that message then. No Kings. Why these protests, and what does that phrase really signal in this context, especially against a military parade?
Well, a key theme highlighted again and again in the sources is rejecting what the organizers see as authoritarian symbolism.
Authoritarian symbolism.
Okay. This really gets to their criticism of the parade itself. The sources quote organizers directly. They say the parade isn't about, national strength or military readiness in a neutral way. They call it a show of dominance rather than patriotism.
Ah, okay. Dominance rather than patriotism. That's a strong framing.
It is, and it's crucial for understanding their motive. They see the parade embodying the kind of power display they associate with, non-democratic systems or even monarchies. which is exactly what No Kings pushes against.
Right, and the sources also say this isn't just about the parade, right?
Yeah.
The movement has broader goals, like defending democratic norms.
Exactly. It's positioned as rallying against things the organizers connect to excessive executive power. Perceived executive overreach is mentioned, and also specifically ICE raids.
So No King's Day is like an umbrella theme, bringing together different concerns people have about the administration's policies or approach.
That seems to be the idea. The parade, the ICE raids, other issues, they're all being folded into this larger narrative about defending democracy against what they view as, well, as overreach.
And their core declaration, the sources say, is super direct. No thrones, no crowns, no kings.
Simple, potent, and it immediately brings up history, doesn't it?
It really does. And this is where it gets historically fascinating. No kings. It's not new. Not at all.
Nope. Deeply embedded, goes right back to 1776.
It's basically the core idea behind the American Revolution, the founding of the country. Explicitly rejecting monarchy, rejecting absolute power in one person.
That's such a powerful connection for them to make. And the Declaration of Independence itself, the source reminds us of those lines, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, and that wasn't just philosophy, right? It was revolutionary. It declared that power comes from the people, the governed, that people have rights no king can just grant or take away.
It completely flips the old power dynamic. Government serves the people, protects their rights, not the other way around.
Exactly. So this protest movement, by using no kings, is essentially arguing that their interpretation of current events goes against that fundamental American principle.
And the sources bring in experts to back this up. There's a quote from Sarah Martinez, a history professor at Georgetown. She says that people wearing no kings protest shirts today, it connects them to a 248-year-old tradition of resistance to tyranny.
That historical anchor is huge. It frames the current movement not just as a reaction to today's politics, but as part of this long American tradition of being watchful about concentrated power.
Gives the slogan serious weight. Ties today's worries back to the nation's origin story, its break from monarchy.
So this phrase, no kings, it carries centuries of meaning. And protesters are directly applying it to their concerns now about democratic institutions.
From their perspective, it's like a shorthand way to say certain actions or symbols feel fundamentally un-American, based on those founding ideals.
Yeah, it's a really potent use of historical language to make a present-day critique. It relies on that shared cultural memory of what America rejected back in 1776.
Okay, so let's look at how this movement is actually taking shape on the ground. The sources keep stressing its decentralized nature and also its inclusiveness. We talked about the 1,500-plus actions.
Right. It bears repeating. It's not one giant march on Washington. It's thousands of smaller local events all over.
Which has strategic advantages, right?
Definitely. Makes it much more accessible. People don't have to travel to D.C. It's probably more resilient, too. You can't just shut down one location and stop the whole thing.
Empowers local communities. They organize on their own terms, but still contribute to this larger national message.
Mm-hmm. And the sources give some really concrete examples, some regional highlights that show this decentralization in action.
Like in Dallas-Fort Worth. The reports mention Texas state troopers are preparing, standing ready, which suggests authorities are taking notice.
Yeah, indicates a certain level of official anticipation. And interestingly, in Dallas, the sources say these anti-Trump No Kings events are happening alongside protests focused specifically on mass deportation policies.
Ah. So that shows how the broad No Kings theme gets linked to very specific local issues, like immigration in this case.
Exactly. It shows the message is adaptable. It can serve as a platform for various related concerns people have in their own communities.
Makes sense. Then Philadelphia. Sounds like a big one is planned there. An event at Love Park at noon. Then a march down the Ben Franklin Parkway.
Yeah, and the sources actually give an estimated crowd size for Philly alone, somewhere between 60,000 and 80,000 attendees.
60 to 80,000. Just in Philly.
That's the estimate reported. If that pans out, it really highlights the potential for those massive local turnouts we talked about. And Philly, you know, with its history, Independence Hall, it's a pretty symbolically charged place for a No Kings protest.
Good point. Okay, then there's this really interesting one from Midland, Michigan.
Oh, yeah, the No Kings, Just Queens rally.
Right. The sources say this event explicitly blends the anti-authoritarian protest with LGBTQ solidarity. It features drag performances, described as family-friendly programming.
That Midland example is perfect for illustrating the inclusive aspect the sources mention. It shows how that core message, rejecting hierarchy, no kings, is being interpreted and combined with other movements, in this case celebrating LGBTQ identity, just queens.
Creates a broader coalition under that same banner.
Totally. And the sources also mention high-profile speakers getting involved in some places, like Michigan AG Dana Nessel. That shows engagement from different parts of society, too.
And it's not just those specific spots. The sources confirm broader participation in places like Atlanta and the Bay Area, with citywide coalitions involved.
So the sheer variety, big marches like Philly, culturally specific rallies like Midland, it really backs up the source's point about a broad tent approach, making the movement relevant to diverse groups.
Now, with any large-scale protest, especially one framed against government actions, there's always the potential for tension. The sources do touch on this.
They mention President Trump's reported warning about deploying very big force against protesters in D.C.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a potential flashpoint.
It does, particularly for any events right there in the Capitol. But, crucially, the sources emphasize, again, the vast majority, over 1,500 of these planned protests, are happening outside D.C.
Right, which shifts the focus of potential tension and the preparations to the local level. Cities and towns across the country where these events are actually planned.
Exactly. And the sources say local authorities are preparing. In many cities, they're reportedly on alert.
What kind of preparation?
Well, the sources mention authorities in multiple states deploying officers, and in some places announcing road closures ahead of June 14th.
Okay. So law enforcement nationwide is taking the potential for large crowds seriously, planning based on their local situations.
Seems so. Implementing measures based on their own assessments for their specific locations.
So, looking ahead then, what comes next? What are the expectations for this movement, its momentum? The sources point to one key expectation for the 14th.
Massive local turnouts.
Right.
Across the country.
Yeah, that seems to be the goal, the measure of success. Not one central event, but the cumulative impact of all these decentralized actions.
If they get large turnouts in lots of different places, it would send a strong signal about widespread activism, independent of just federal events in D.C.
And the sources also mention specific things that have apparently boosted momentum recently.
Yeah, they point to recent ICE raids and also some federal responses to other protests. These are specifically mentioned as events that have galvanized more people, rallied more participants.
So specific government actions are acting like catalysts, fueling motivation.
That's what the sources suggest, providing concrete examples that resonate. And apparently, these events have also led to more training events for activists.
Interesting. Suggests a growing level of organization and preparation within the movement itself, responding to these developments.
Preparing for the day of action.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit, because one of the sources takes us down this really interesting path, how the No Kings message is showing up in culture, specifically in fashion.
Right. The article focusing on the No Kings protest and No Kings t-shirt, America's democratic spirit in fashion.
It really brings that historical idea right into the present, into something tangible you can wear.
It does. The article basically frames these shirts not just as clothes, but as these potent statement pieces, connecting the history of No Kings directly to what's happening now, activism-wise, even linking it to July 4th celebrations.
The core idea seems to be wear your values. Like combining patriotic pride, the founding ideals part, with active, modern civic engagement.
Yeah, turning your t-shirt into a kind of public statement, a form of communication.
And the article mentions specific designs. There's the 4th of July America Democracy, No Kings Since 1776 t-shirt. Very explicit.
And the No Kings Protest U.S. Democracy shirt. And it even notes designs that get really specific with policy critiques, like one described as No Kings Protest Fuck Iced Tea.
Wow, okay, so it ranges from the broad historical principle to very pointed current political takes.
And another phrase highlighted is hands off our democracy. So a real spectrum of messaging under that No Kings umbrella.
The article talks about the real-world impact, right? Saying these shirts can actually start conversations.
Yeah, about what it means to be American, about democratic values today. It moves beyond just wearing something. The clothing becomes a social tool.
There are anecdotes in the source, like Mike Thompson from Portland, Oregon. He wore a No Kings shirt to a July 4th parade.
And people stopped him.
Yeah, apparently lots of people stopped him because of the shirt. He called it a major conversation starter.
That's a perfect example. A t-shirt turning a passive event, like watching a parade, into active political discussion.
Then there's Jessica Rodriguez, a political organizer in Austin. She finds the shirts useful for her work.
How so?
Well, the article quotes her saying, "A no king's tee is versatile. It works for a town hall meeting, but it's still bold enough for a protest march."
Ah, okay. So practical for organizers, like a visual identifier, communicates the theme, works in different settings.
Exactly. And David Chen, a civic engagement coordinator, he's quoted saying democracy isn't a spectator sport.
Right, I remember that quote.
And he suggests wearing your values, like on a shirt, can be a starting point for participation. He notes these shirts pop up at voter drives, town halls, not just protests.
So it's a form of visible commitment, even if you're not marching. A low-barrier way to participate.
Then there's a sociologist, Dr. Amanda Foster, who specializes in fashion and identity. She talks about the psychological impact.
Oh, what does she say?
She's quoted saying, wearing a U.S. protest shirt can feel like armoring themselves with their beliefs, like a kind of psychological prep work for engaging with others, maybe even facing disagreement.
That's fascinating. So it's not just outward communication, it's also an internal thing, reinforcing your own identity and conviction before you step into a social space.
Yeah. And another person, Rebecca Kim from Denver, shared that her No King shirt actually sparked workplace conversations about civic engagement. Unexpectedly opened doors.
Wow. So these symbols can really permeate everyday spaces, bringing these discussions into the office, the coffee shop.
Seems like it. And that ties into the community building aspect the source mentions. Tom Wilson, a retired teacher in Phoenix.
What was his story?
He connected with someone at a coffee shop just because of his 4th of July shirt, led to a chat, and they discovered they both did similar volunteer work.
So the shirt acted like a beacon, drawing like-minded people together who might have just walked past each other otherwise, facilitating community.
Exactly. And finally, there's a fashion historian, Dr. Robert Martinez. He puts his whole trend into a bigger context.
How does he see it?
He sees it as fashion returning to its historical role as a form of civic participation, part of a move toward message-driven fashion, connecting it directly to a tradition of American descent going all the way back to the founding.
That's a great perspective. Grounds this modern thing in a deep history. Reminds us that using clothes for political statements isn't new at all. It links the person wearing a No King's shirt today back to, well, the revolutionaries.
The article even gets into practicalities about these shirts. Styling tips are offered.
Like what? How to wear your protest shirt.
Yeah, like pairing a 4th of July shirt with denim for a casual look, or layering a No King's protest shirt under a blazer with chinos for, say, a civic event where you want to be professional but still make a statement.
Okay, interesting they get that specific.
And it details the quality, 100% premium cotton, reinforced seams, good screen printing, pre-shrunk double needle hem, emphasizing durability.
So focusing on the actual product quality too.
And care instructions. Cold water wash, inside out, no bleach, air dry. They really went into detail on the clothing itself.
Guess they wanted to cover all the bases for potential buyers reading the piece.
The source also lists pros and cons for wearing these shirts. Advantages: clear message, quality, versatile, conversation starter, comfortable.
Makes sense. What about the considerations, the cons?
Well, the bold message might not fly in all workplaces, obviously. That it requires confidence to wear. That it might attract attention, both positive and negative, and maybe limited color options to keep the design strong. Pretty balanced take.
Yeah, acknowledging the potential social friction is realistic.
And more customer stories reinforce the personal impact. Maria Gonzalez uses hers on weekends, not just rallies, because she likes the quality of message. James Patterson, works in government, finds the Hands Off Our Democracy shirt a reminder of his public service purpose. Linda Chang's July 4th gathering conversation sparked by her shirt.
So real people finding different kinds of value in wearing these messages.
Right. And it even summarized FAQs. Historical meaning, yes, 1776, okay for July 4th. Yes, celebrating principles. Care, cold water, wearing to work, depends, maybe layer it. Sizes available, XS3, XL, different cuts.
Very thorough piece on protest fashion then.
Definitely went deep on the t-shirt angle. So let's try and pull all this together. What have we really seen in this deep dive?
Well, we've seen how a specific date, June 14th, is being shaped into this major focal point for nationwide protests. And these protests are explicitly grounding themselves in historical American ideals.
Right. We explored how that phrase, no kings, born from rejecting monarchy way back in 1776, is being directly picked up and used today by groups to voice concerns about what they see as authoritarian trends or specific executive actions.
It's a really clear example of historical language being repurposed, given new life in contemporary political debates. Still potent after all this time.
And then we took that interesting detour into culture, seeing how this historical message isn't just on protest signs, but it's showing up on T-shirts, becoming this form of personal expression.
Yeah, and a tool for starting conversations, building community, a way to signal your civic stance in everyday life.
The sources paint this picture of a movement that's really decentralized, spread across tons of cities, trying to be inclusive.
And apparently energized by recent events leading to these expectations of pretty significant turnout across the country on the 14th. It's this mix of history, current politics, and cultural expression all woven together.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? If one simple phrase from 1776 can be reactivated like this, sparking nationwide action, conversation, even fashion trends today.
What other historical ideas are out there? What other symbols might hold unexpected power or relevance for us now as we try to figure out modern civic life?
It's a provocative question. How do we engage with our own history? Not just as facts in a book, but as this living resource of language, symbols, motivations that still shapes how we talk about who we are and what we want the country to be.
It really highlights the enduring power of those foundational ideas, for better or worse, and how they keep resurfacing in new contexts. Definitely something to keep thinking about.